Thank you, everyone, for attending and participating. My name is August, and I am the Executive Director of the LGBTQ History Project, nonprofit dedicated to preserving the lives and legacies of LGBTQ activists. In this panel, we have activists from the Gay Liberation Revolution. We have Hiram, who was a member of the Tallahassee Gay Liberation Front, Kathy, who was the first out elected politician in America from Ann Arbor, and Peter, who was in the Lexington Gay Liberation Front. We're going to have a conversation, ask some questions, and then we're going to do a Q&A. So I'm going to turn off my camera so we get them full screen. And I'd like to start with Peter. Can you talk about learning about homosexuality and gayness?
Um, uh, personally, I remember being attracted to, well, uh, Roman statues. I was a big reader, and I loved the encyclopedia. We had a set of encyclopedias when I was about 4 years old, and those were my favorite pages. Um, and I don't know that I thought a lot about it until I was maybe like 10 or 11. And then I was always a person who liked the library, and I found the word somewhere, and I started. So every time I'd go anywhere, I'd go to the library and I'd look it up in the card catalog and see what books they had, and tried to educate myself about it. So that's when I knew about it. And I had read all the dumb stuff, like that it's an illness and that it's caused by having like a smothering mother and all this business. And I said, I think this is all so silly. It doesn't even make any difference. And I always kind of said, the minute I get a chance, I'm just going to see if they can just live like that and see if anybody cares. Um, you know, I was all excited about the boys in the band when I read about it. I've read a lot of movie and play reviews, of course, so I knew something about it because there's been a little bit of there's a presence in the movies, especially, but it's a very disappointing presence because most of the gay people in the movies are just dreadful. Or they were back in the 1960s anyway. And so I don't know. I tried really hard to when I came out, I just kind of dispensed with all that. So that's and it's never really changed much. I've had a lot of people, well, my family didn't think it was real. So
Thank you. Kathy, can you talk about the first protest you attended and what it stirred up in you?
So, well, probably the first protest I ever attended was against the Vietnam War. And at the time, I was with, thousands of other people in Ann Arbor, Michigan, who felt that it was um, an unjust war where the United States was trying to impose its will on another nation and that we had no business in it. And so it was an it was an exhilarating feeling, but it was also I certainly noticed that it was being led by men primarily. And I questioned some of the tactics. They led us up to a road, a major highway, Route 23, to stop the traffic, which I didn't understand. I just followed and then ran when the police came. And I'm trying to think when my first gay march was, but the the I can absolutely tell you that the first I helped organize and attended the first large lesbian and gay rights march in DC in October of 1979. And it was just like nothing. The feeling was indescribable. It was just amazing. And it's a feeling that folks can't have today because there are not hundreds of thousands of us together. It was wonderful.
And Hiram, you told me that you learned about the Gay Liberation Front by attending a meeting in Los Angeles. Can you talk about that first meeting and how it inspired you?
Sure. Well, obviously, in Tallahassee, there was really, nothing, no gay bars, no, gay anything. When I first went there, and I literally just came out at about, time that I went to Tallahassee. Um, and I mean, I just need to go back a little bit before I get to LA, because and when I was in Tallahassee, there was nothing there. So a group of friends from Tallahassee went to Mardi Gras in 1970. And that was the first time that I had been in a place where there were gay people like in the street who were kissing and holding hands and just having partying, being themselves out there. And that was just a very motivational for me because I thought, well, really, it should be like this everywhere. I mean, this should be normal, not just something that I would experience when I go to somewhere like that. And it wasn't very long after that that I went to Los Angeles briefly just to visit my grandfather. And I have no idea how I heard about a gay liberation front meeting, but I went there. And again, now that was like eye-opening in a completely different way because the experience in New Orleans had been one of just people partying, et cetera, et cetera. But here it was like people who were seeing their being gay in a political context, and wanting to organize to, promote gay rights or gay visibility, all the different things that Gay Liberation Front at that point was was trailblazing in, right? And I only went to that one meeting, but I left there and said, okay, I mean, this is something that has to happen. So when I went back to Tallahassee, this small group of friends, I said, look, this is what the experience I had, and this is the kinds of things that I heard. And I think we should be doing something like that here. I mean, so what if it's Tallahassee and not Los Angeles? Let's just do it. And and that was the start. We put up some posters around campus at the Florida State and to say about the meeting, and we then, people that I had not known before came to that early meeting. And really, like the first couple of meetings that we had were just like, what are we going to be? What are we going to do? Why are we here? And and we decided, okay, well, we want to be like other student groups on campus and try to be recognized, etc. And that's how we proceeded. We applied to be recognized as a student group, even though we had people involved that were from the city of Tallahassee, local residents, not students. Um, but we decided that we would go the route of trying to be recognized as a student group, and then of course that began a whole process of resistance from the university, et cetera, that served to really fortify us and to really motivate us to do much more. And that begins to be another long story, so I'll cut it there.
Thank you, Peter. How did you come to embrace your identity in a time when there were so few role models?
Uh, I I guess I don't know how to explain it. I got, I decided it didn't matter. It was nobody else's business what I did. I did it. Um, I got picked on a lot growing up. I mean, you're talking about development of identity. I was getting called a queer before I had any idea what that really meant. Because I went around calling other people that in response, and everybody said, "You don't know what that means." And they were kind of right. I didn't. So again, I got on a kick of looking everything up. So I was very well researched by the time I was probably 13 or 14. I think I remember going to the library and they wouldn't let me check out The Persian Boy by Mary Renaud, which was a book about, I think, Alexander the Great and his boyfriend. But I went to one school where the teachers were enlightened enough, they let me read The Naked Ape by Desmond Morris, which was a very neutral description of human sexual behavior. So then I knew all about it. So I kind of took it out of nowhere. I never knew any other gay people. The first gay person I knew that was gay that I ever saw kind of horrified me because he was a person who cruised the truck stop bathrooms at a place where I worked when I was in the 10th grade, and it kind of frightened me. Uh, but when I got to college, I was kind of convinced I didn't have to do any of the stuff, any of that negative stuff. When I saw the boys in the band, I didn't want to live like that. I just said I want my own life. I was always very attracted to the whole hippie lifestyle too thing. And so I just said, why not just be natural? And I don't know. Eventually it worked out. Eventually. It's a complicated problem.
How did you learn about and join the Gay Liberation Front?
I was a freshman at UK. They were putting up posters. They had these Xerox posters, when was it? Homosexuals, bisexuals, heterosexuals, just plain asexuals, and just plain sexuals are invited to come to a meeting about this. And they were meeting over in one of the buildings on the campus. And it was in the winter. I know that because I didn't see them at first in the fall. And so I just went over to go to a meeting. I was checking it out. And it was a very similar group to what you're describing, Hiram, which is it was a mixture. There were just a few students. There were a lot of people there were these kind of agitatory people from the town, from Lexington that were not UK students that were there. And they were in the early stages of planning. There's a certain amount of hoops you have to jump through to apply for a student group. And the mission was also the same. We weren't really trying to be huge political activists at that point. We were trying to generate a gay-friendly social alternative for gay students. At the time, the only thing that was going on is there was a notorious gay bar in Lexington that had been there for many years. It had probably been there since the 50s, and so this was in 1971. But no, I couldn't get in. No, you couldn't get in unless you were 21. So there was an enormous population of gay kids at UK who had no outlet whatsoever. They were just wandering around lost. And we wanted to start some kind of a social outreach for people like that. And I didn't start that idea, but I probably refined it. But that was our plan. We were paying student activity fees. So we thought we ought to have a right to have some kind of social group that meets our needs. I didn't feel like going to a basketball game or a football game, which they both were just adored at UK. So that was the plan. The mission, I guess you'd put it.
What year was this, Peter?
I got involved in 71. I understand now because I looked at, like I said, I kind of read up on this before I came in so I could actually tell you that accurately. I think it started the year before. There was a gay liberation group in Louisville before UK, but it fell apart. I think there was something that went on with the police busted them because they had some kind of underage kid they were giving shelter to, and it turned into a mess. And so it kind of dissolved. But one of the people from there was when I got in was the president of the GLF. And I don't know, I thought he was the first president. The timeline that's on the UK website now says there was a person before that, but I never met her. It was not, and he didn't last after that year. By September of 72, there were nobody left from the first round, so they needed officers, and I agreed to be the president because nobody else would do it. And I just said, okay, I'll carry the ball here and see what happens.
Kathy, can you talk about being recruited for office? What issues did you care about, and what issues do you care about now?
So I was a member of an organization in Ann Arbor called the Human Rights Party. And it was primarily started by students, although it did have a statewide presence in Michigan. And I was an active part of the organization from probably, 1971 when I got to U of M on. And it was an organization that was multi-issue. We believed in economic justice. We believed in the breaking of gender roles and gender stereotypes. We did strike support work, welfare rights work, and of course, worked against the war in Vietnam. And we really had politics very much like those that Bernie Sanders espouses. We wanted a more just society in every way. And we used electoral politics as one way of making change, of putting our ideas across and trying to basically show a different way of living and being in the world and fighting for what we believed in. We were very much a part of the social movement of the 60s and 70s. And we elected two people to city council quite by surprise in 1972. One was from the student ward and one was from the first ward, which was a mixed ward of working class and students. And we were quite surprised to win in that ward. And when it came to 1974, their term was ending, and some folks from the party approached me to run. And basically, most of the people that I thought would be much better at it had finished graduate school and were going on to start their life elsewhere and to start their careers. And I was just finishing with my 4 years of undergraduate and had no particular plans. So I said yes. And after the fact, after I agreed, someone suggested that I run as openly gay, my campaign manager. And I said yes. We were very much of a collective organization. We made decisions in meetings, often by consensus and talking things through. So the organization agreed that I should run as openly gay, and that was a part of my campaign. And now I'm very much involved. I shouldn't say very much involved. I'm involved as much as I can be in what's going on today in terms of standing up against the backlash and the reversal of policies that people my age fought very hard to win for us, such as the right of a woman to decide what to do with her own body, and the right of LGBTQ people to have rights and to, be free and be proud and not have books banned and so forth. So I went to there were large protests all over the country yesterday against what's going on in the Trump administration. And I was there, and there were many, many, many gay flags, many people with signs saying, be who you are, love who you want to love, among many other signs, such as, we support immigrants and hands off Medicaid. So it was a wonderful collection of people, speaking out against what's going on today.
What was the 1979 march you mentioned earlier?
It was the first national lesbian and gay march on Washington, D.C. And it was organized. There was a steering committee of folks throughout the country. I don't know if the Gay Liberation Front or who came up with it. I know that I was a part of the organizing of folks to go to the march here in Pittsburgh, but people came from all over the country. and it was wonderful. I mean, there were musicians, speakers. It was a phenomenal turnout.
How did it compare to like marches for Vietnam that you went to when you were younger?
Well, the anti-Vietnam marches, the anti-war marches were obviously um, very political. We were very much, you know, we felt like we were doing destruction in Vietnam. And also, of course, many young men my age and older were faced with the draft. They didn't choose to go to fight in that war or to choose to be a part of the military at all. You were drafted, and um, people who did not want to go to Vietnam and, uh, be part of basically a killing machine, fled to Canada or sometimes became conscientious objectors. So we were really fighting for the Vietnamese people and for our own, you know, young men in America as well. The difference in going to the march in DC was, even though our rights were probably still pretty minimal back then, it was so celebratory and so joyous, and just the feeling of all of us being there together, all shapes, sizes, ages, colors, skin colors. I mean, it was just a phenomenal feeling of joy. And also determination that we were going to change things, and we were going to change, the face of how we were looked at and how we were going to be able to live and walk in the world.
Hiram, Peter, did either of you check the box? How'd you get out of the draft?
Well, in my case, the you know by the time that I was, well, in 1971, when all this was going on, is when they brought in the lottery. So everybody who had, got a number assigned to your birthday, and if your birthday, the number was in the first 50, you were going to Vietnam. And if you were like 50 to like 100, be prepared because, you might well get called up. And then, subsequently, like by the time you got to 150, you were pretty clear, and mine came up 191. I remember very clearly, we were at the student union, like hundreds and hundreds of people just glued to the TV, all waiting for their birthday to be called up. And, everything from people like, screaming and or crying, and to others just screaming with joy later on. So that's how the draft issue came up. I assume, Peter, it must have been similar for you, that
Very.
alcohol then, yeah. Yeah.
I didn't turn 18 though, but I got lucky because I turned 18 in 72. I came to college when I was younger than
Oh, okay, yeah.
the norm. But when 72, when I turned 18, they canceled the draft that year. I don't think there was any drama at all.
Mm.
And I was like about time. But I had been exploring what to do. Now, see, I had some of the first gay friends I made were these two guys that were both Vietnam vets that were at UK. And they said that they told the recruiters they were gay when they got drafted, and they said they don't care, they didn't care. Because I had expected to use that initially, and then I was like, so I was actually kind of like exploring other options.
Mhm.
And a very well-known activist in Lexington was, I think he was already in federal prison for conscientious objection. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was kind of up in the air about it. And I had been raised over by the Air Force Base in Ohio. And apparently my family thought I was going to join the service immediately when I turned 18. I guess, I mean, they didn't know me very well in a lot of ways. because they were real offended when I said I wasn't going to do that. They thought I was being a traitor. And so I hadn't quite solidified what I was going to do, but I didn't have any intention of going, I'll say that. For much the reasons that you're talking about, Kathy, the whole thing was completely ridiculous exercise and, well, imperialism, frankly. So the United States gets mixed up in this stuff so often they don't care if they kill people in other countries to get what they want out of it. So yeah. So I didn't have to.
Hiram, how did you define liberation during the gay liberation movement?
Oh, okay. That's a that's a rather complex one. Because I think I always thought of it as being on two levels. First, the sort of the personal liberation of coming to not really coming to terms with being gay, but be accepting that as in a very positive way. So learning to uh, see myself as a gay man in a very positive way, having grown up with only negative stereotypes in my head. I mean, I knew I was gay at the age of 14. And, even though at that time I was in Miami, now Tallahassee, there were absolutely zero positive or even any positive images of it and any kind of LGBTQ people. Um, but there were plenty of negative ones, on TV, in the news or something. Um, so, and just socially, obviously, what Peter was saying about being, kids calling each other queer and that just that kind of social construct of gays being as queer as faggots, something very negative. And when you don't have anything positive by way of imagery, you don't know. I mean, until I went to Tallahassee, I was like, I guess, scared, ashamed, or whatever. And the first really liberating experiences for me was when I started to tell a few people that I was gay. I told, this is just before I went to Tallahassee. I was I guess 19 by then, 18, 19. And I told my best friend, my closest friend, and he stopped being my friend. I mean, he was just, so I think probably anything more than anything else frightened. Yeah. And the fact and that instead of I mean I think I look back on that time. I think I could have like really just went inward and been upset by that, but in fact it made me angry, that this is my friend and how can this is me and how can he not accept me. It made me really angry and confrontational. So I went around very confrontationally telling a few other friends, and oh, okay. I mean, a couple of thought maybe that was the case. Others, okay. And I thought, oh, okay. So maybe it's not all negative. And then I think after that, I was after that, when the whole Tallahassee and then the gay liberation began, then it was a liberation on a very different level because then it was the liberation as LGBT people, right? LGBTQ people, and what did that mean? And that so it was liberation in the sense for me of liberation from oppression as gay people, liberation from the laws that existed at the time against homosexuality. I mean, in Tallahassee, with the time that we were involved in GLF, I mean, there were still statutes on the books in Florida. It's I can't remember, but they were all called like something abomination against nature acts or something like that, and people could get arrested for that. Um, and so it was liberation from that kind of legal oppression. I think liberation from social oppression, from society in general. Um, So, it was a very multifaceted thing. And then, in the summer of 70, after we had started the GLF in Tallahassee, I went to spend the summer in New York, and I was involved in the New York Gay Liberation Front that whole summer, which was, a revolutionary and revolutionizing um, experience. And that at GLF we had consciousness raising groups, and they were groups at which in small groups away from the politics of the well, somewhat away from the politics of the main GLF group, where we explored what our own inner prejudices about ourselves and about, being LGBT, um, our prejudices about each other. I was in a group that was all African American and Latino gays. And so we were, looking at what, liberation from even the attitudes and the exclusionary attitudes of even within GLF. So that was a very interesting experience because it was personal, but it was also a group effort within GLF to really seek your own personal liberation. So yes, it was something that had many different levels, and I think continues to.
Thank you. Peter, what do you wish younger activists knew about the early days of the gay liberation revolution?
Well, that it pays to have the nerve to do it. That you really have to just, I mean, you expect pushback, but if enough people stand up for something, it becomes very hard to retaliate. I mean, that's I don't know that I have anything huge I could tell them about it because I don't know that I understood it very well. I really felt like the way I handled the potential of what we did, looking back, I feel like I handled it probably wrong. We didn't accomplish any of our goals particularly. We survived for a couple of 3 or 4 years and then it kind of faded off. And it was not something I understood very well then. And I had a lot of time to think about it and wish I'd figured out it had been more strategic. But I think the young people now need to realize that you can change things if you stand up and try. And you don't even have to be real perfect usually, because most of the people that are rearranging the furniture right now for us, especially about like women's rights and trans rights and all that stuff, they don't expect any pushback. They're bullies. If they can get a super majority in a place like Kentucky, then they can just do whatever they want to. But if you really push back, they kind of fold because they don't really have a lot of standing. And I don't actually think they're very popular. If they weren't cheating flagrantly all over the place and in order to exclude votes that they don't agree with, I don't think that they'd have even as much power as they have now. But you got to stand up. I think the Vietnam War in particular is a good example of that, better than the gay movement at that point. The Vietnam War was clearly stopped by the protests. Would you agree, Kathy? I mean,
I do agree.
I was totally shocked that it happened, but I couldn't believe they stopped it. It's simply, I didn't understand how politics worked then. They were afraid to say, well, we're really sorry, we're wrong, excuse us. They just decided this is such a loser, we're going to stop funding it. And so they pulled the funding and didn't do anything else. And so that's how that stuff works. With gay rights, it's taken a lot of effort. And I never thought we'd come this far. I never thought we'd be so free about it based on how awful everybody was in the 1970s. So it pays to stand up for it.
Kathy, when you look at LGBTQ activism today, what gives you hope and what concerns you?
I It's hard for me to answer that question in great detail because I'm not as familiar with all the LGBTQ organizations that are out there that are being active, but I know they're there, and I know that what gives me hope is that there are so many young people now that have grown up with a whole different an image of gayness that has been positive, and that has been out there. And I do not think that people are going to just accept being pushed back, being made to seem as less than, other than, and so forth. And I know that I went to a meeting, recently in Pittsburgh, of women, obviously much younger than myself, and they were people that had formed an organization for social reasons, to, have fun, get together, etc., and decided, based on what's going on, that they wanted to do more. They wanted to not only fight back for themselves, but they were interested in what they could do in Pittsburgh for the immigrant community, for the people that might have issues with food and so forth. So I think that really gives me a lot of hope, that people are seeing that that our struggle is not separate from other struggles, and we need to combine, with other groups, because what's happening is that people are being made to be, quote, the other. And we saw that in the election when they used transgender ads to make transgender people the other, and therefore the Democrats are supporting transgender. And then the other people that were the other are the immigrants, whether, legal or illegal. They were also the other. And it's very easy to just look to the side and deny people rights when you forget their humanity. And I feel very strongly that the gay community and lesbian and gay people, transgender people, we are going to fight for the humanity of everyone, for our transgender youth, for immigrants. I mean, I don't know if people are aware of, one of the people in this roundup of Venezuelan gang members is a person by the name of Andre Hernandez, who is a gay makeup artist who was rounded up and is now in the El Salvadorian prison, because these people were given no due process, and he has no gang affiliations. He had a tattoo that says he has a tattoo that says "Mom and Dad" with a crown on it. And ICE rounded him up, said he was part of a Venezuelan gang, and he is now sitting in El Salvador in prison. So I really feel this is an opportunity right now. I mean, it's a terrible time, but it's also it's an opportunity for us to all band together and fight against these kinds of things that are so not American, so very undemocratic, unconstitutional, and un-American.
If I can jump in and kind of go back for a couple of minutes, we started to talk about how we viewed some of the effects from then. Peter mentioned that you weren't sure how successful it was because it didn't continue. There was a lot of things that began and didn't continue, but I think all of those were like pebbles that created a rolling on effect. Sure, maybe the GLF in Lexington, the GLF in Tallahassee didn't continue beyond when we graduated, my group of friends. But 2 years later, there was another organization, and it followed by another one. And in fact, I was invited to come back to celebrate what they considered was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the present Pride Union, even though,
There you go.
no continuity with the GLF. But and I think if you look at that nationwide, I mean, the fact that, that we began all of these organizations, that we became visible, that we brought our issues to the fore, and in our local communities, especially important in our smaller, non-coastal, smaller communities, where there weren't any positive images, and maybe maybe the images that we were portraying there that everybody thought were positive, but they were images of people who were being proud and who were being assertive of their rights. And so maybe the freshmen who were watching the seniors, doing this, it helped in a way kind of liberate them personally to go on and maybe join whatever other activities that went to in other cities. And I think that kind of uh, pebbles growing into stones, growing into rocks countrywide is what led to things eventually, like the march in 1979. I mean, when I was in New York for that summer of GLF, we had the very first Gay Pride March in the summer of 1970. And, eventually, that was probably 30, 40, 50, I don't know, maybe a few hundred people. By then it was a few hundred people. And of course, that grew over time into something gigantic. Now, I'm not enamored of what gay pride parades became over time, which was parades rather than protests or, demanding of rights. It was sort of people being on floats, throwing, things, their clothes off and whatever. And the commercialization of these events, with companies that don't give shit about gay people, or actually are homophobic. That, again, that's another story. But for many people, even those events can be, you get a young person now from Lexington or, some even smaller town now somewhere that, sees that this kind of event goes on in Washington, New York, or everywhere else around the country. And they say, hey, we have a place in society, and whoa, now they're trying to take that place away from us. Maybe we better start doing something about it. And that's my hope, that the younger people will not just want to party, but feeling that threat to the rights that they never really knew they didn't have before, will want to start taking a stand and doing something to protect those rights.
Hey,
I
you know,
forgot.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I forgot to mention one important thing, August, when you asked about organizations. There's a national organization called the Victory Fund, which helps lesbian and gay folks, transgender folks who want to run for office. They both do, they do seminars that help them, sort of help people understand the ABCs of how to run for office, how to fundraise, how to get your message across, etc. And they're a great organization, very effective. And I went to one of their seminars here in Pittsburgh recently, and one of the things that people said, one of the great values of having lesbians, gays, transgenders elected to office is that when things come up, when issues come up, when bills come up, we're not being talked about. We're in the room and we have to be talked to. Whatever bill it might be that's coming up, whether it's I don't know, transgender in sports, or whether it's bathrooms or something of this nature, the libraries, we are right in the room for the conversation. So there is important work and serious work being done throughout the country, and I should have mentioned them before.
what, I want to, based on your question, I did actually have something I thought was worth sharing, which is that I would like for the younger gay activists to recognize that it's not just about being gay, it's a broader issue of social justice for everybody. I think the way that George Bush got into power, for example, W. Bush got into power, is because of the kind of divide and conquer strategy that they used in during when Clinton was president. Uh, uh, the gay people forget that they're a minority, and we have to work with allies. So we need to respect our allies. I can tell you that in our group, like I said, we didn't have a ton of gay support from the community because they were terrified that somebody would think they were mixed up in it. But we had straight allies. The People's Party was made an actual conscious effort to say, hey, we're on your side. It was one of the things that made me cynical about politics, is that neither Republicans or Democrats would ever even say the word gay. Bill Clinton was the first person that ever actually mentioned it as a platform, and he was treated like a failure because he couldn't pull the gays in the military thing off. But he actually stopped the discrimination of being gay as a condition of being a federal employee, for example, which was a huge social step, and it got zero support. I mean, I heard people ranting and raving about him, and that's a divide and conquer kind of philosophy, and it'll happen again because again, gay people are, what are we, 5, 6% of the population at the most. We're not, we can't outnumber anybody except in maybe places like New York. So we got to work with people.
This question's for anyone. What happens when we internalize our oppression?
It fucks up your mental health. That's for that's one for sure. And I'm very grateful that I did not go that way beyond the age of 18 or so, because that really paralyzes you. I mean, I don't see how you can kind of um, move in beyond that into be concerned about liberation in any kind of broader sense if you yourself are so self-oppressed that you know you can't even come to terms with it for you. How are you going to try to argue for rights, for your rights if you're so self-oppressed about who you are?
I I can tell you, you can see it in American politics. Um, this situation we're in right now is caused by a self-hating gay man, Peter Thiel. He just spent an enormous amount of money to get Donald Trump reelected. He is JD Vance is a protege of his, and JD Vance, who kind of comes off as ambiguously gay, frankly, working actively against gay people, and that's happened again and again. Gay people who don't love themselves, and they politically oppress other gay people. Um, Ken Melman was the chairman of the Republican Party. He came out after W was president. I mean, that's kind of appalling. How could you do that? And I think that's what happens when you internalize oppression. You become an enemy of yourself and all the people that are like you. I don't know how people like that can live with themselves at the end of the day. I mean, I've made mistakes, but I certainly tried to do the right thing for other people.
Can you be a Republican and care about civil rights at this point in history?
At this point, no. I think that's I think that's it. No. I mean, I'm sure that in the past that there were Republicans who had, there were even liberal Republicans supposedly at one point in time, and I think that there were, many. I think there were Republicans who had a social conscience, just who shared maybe even some values. But who just had a very different idea of how you went about things. But I think that has completely disappeared. I think anybody who supports today's Republican Party is opposed to any kind of social justice, equality, or for anybody. other
Yeah,
than
maybe
themselves.
maybe Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah, he was the first president that had a black man for dinner at the White House that wasn't waiting the table. And he horrified everybody in the South by doing it. And he was a really classy Republican. The problem is that the labels are also degraded. You can't tell who people are from their party. Republicans are, I mean, Dwight Eisenhower, if I figured it out right from reading the history, he was like he was a globalist. He was very farsighted. He was very open-minded. And the Republican Party took a nosedive after him. It turned into a gang of thugs and idiots. And the idiots are all just the tools of the thugs that are really running it. That's a really hard thing.
I think that there's a dangerous thing happening right now in the efforts of um, the current powers that be being anti-woke. They're going back and taking things off of websites like contributions of historic Black figures, Native Americans, and so forth. And there's no thought to the history of this country that led to the necessity of diversity and inclusion. It's just like, oh, that never happened. There was no historic discrimination, lack of understanding, lack of celebrating everyone's contributions to the country or what we've done to other people, such as the indigenous folks. There's no thought to that at all. And it can be scary to rewrite history.
An issue that Republicans and people feel strongly about is trans people playing in sports. Does anyone want to talk about that?
I hate to say anything about it. I don't, because, the thing is, it's a really old story. I remember the Olympics in the 60s and 70s. There was an enormous issue about people that were clearly intersexed from the Iron Curtain countries playing against women to get an advantage. Uh, I mean, it caused them to have to start doing chromosome counts before they would let people play. So I don't think that maybe parity in that particular area is entirely thought out very well to be fair to everybody. But at the same time, I don't think it's such a tiny little problem part of the issue of being transgendered. I think it's a really bad it's a divisive point that is causing a lot of grief to people that are trans who need to be treated just like equals in every other respect at the very least. There may just need to be accommodations there. The smartest thing I ever heard was that maybe they need to have a third category of sports participation, which is non-sexed, that it's not for males or females and that anybody wants to play. That would actually solve the problem. Because I don't think you can take a person who's developed physically as a man and expect a woman to compete in some areas. I mean, that was the problem in the first place. But again, I think it's a really nasty little point that doesn't make much difference. The people that are trans have such a hard time gaining self-respect and self-acceptance that making them feel unwelcome, making them feel like they're freaks, which is clearly what's being done. The entire debate is destined to do that. I just think it's outrageously cruel. And frankly, the people that are doing it could care less. They're just using it as an issue to attract morons to vote for it. So that's my take on it.
A question that seems like a non-issue, but it's important to LGBTQ people right now are straight actors playing gay roles. Do any of y'all have any opinions about that you'd like to share?
I mean, not really. I mean, obviously, gay actors have been playing straight roles for since Shakespeare and since the birth of cinema. Um, no, I mean, as long as the characters are being played in a normal, respective way. I mean, not trying to be stereotypes or something. But I think most of the movies that I've seen in recent times, I mean, the I think the straight actors that have played gay roles have done that in a way that I found quite reasonable usually, and the same for the gay actors that I've seen playing straight roles.
Well, they're actors. I, this gets to
That is the point. They're actors.
but you know what? This gets to a really point that we don't quite address because of the argument we're having about all these rights. Is that I think that gay and straight anyway are just social constructs. Most people are not black or white. Most people are shades of gray. There's this pressure to say you're on one side, and the pressure is all one-sided. Nobody's pressuring you to say you're gay because if you say you're gay, they're gonna punish you for it. That's where this all comes from. I mean, it wouldn't matter who you had sex with if they weren't going to put you in jail for being gay or beat you to death or something like that. It's an imaginary line because most people are bisexual. I mean, with Kenzie's research, a third of guys at least have tried it, women too. I mean, everybody messes around, and it takes a ton of sexual pressure to get people to be straight, to get everybody to be straight, and it still doesn't work. So to me, that's a huge issue with label, with finding people by their sexual behavior, because I don't think that's adequate.
You see, I find that a difficult um, argument there because I mean, regardless of how what people where people are on the spectrum of gay, straight, trans, whatever. Um, I mean, yes, I was gay because I had sex with men, but I think part of the whole gay liberation and self-liberation, etc., was um, to develop an identity as a as a gay person, part of a group that are LGBTQ people who regardless of their the ins and outs of their sexuality, shared cultural and societal oppression. And to me, my identity as a gay man was much more to do with that than just with the sex. And at my age, I still consider myself very much a gay person, and my identity is a gay person. And regardless, what's going on in my sex life or not. So I think that, the gay and LGBT, and an identification as gay or LGBT is something much beyond and much more complex than, where you fall on the sort of sexuality spectrum.
We'll go to a Q&A. If anyone has any questions, put them in where it says Q&A at the bottom of the screen. One that came up is, did any of you ever feel oppressed by the church or a church?
Yes. I grew up, the only church I ever went to was the Southern Baptist Church, and man, they're awful. And you can't go out and say it, but I mean, right now, my remaining relative's brother-in-law is a Pentecostal minister, rails against gay people in the pulpit every Sunday. And the cognitive dissonance of the fact that she's always been really nice to me just breaks my heart. She tunes in that service every Sunday, and she knows better, but she never challenges him on it or calls him on it. And the people that do that are just kind of, I think they create a lot of hatred in the world. I don't know. I'm not sure what they're spiritually shepherding anybody into except a mess. So yeah, I certainly felt like that. I was very hostile to the whole idea of religion because of that. I got really tired of the whole thing. But it's really hard to live without some kind of, some kind of metaphysical meaning to life, for me anyway. So I had to figure out how to work around it.
Kathy, Hiram. Either of you?
I never felt oppressed, but I was raised Catholic, but um, really stopped believing in the Catholic Church when I was probably in ninth or 10th grade. And I never thought I would find a church or a spiritual community that sort of get modeled my beliefs of, my own inherent worth, but also of social justice and equality and essentially love. And I became a member a number of years ago of a Unitarian Universalist church here in Pittsburgh, and the community meant a lot to me, and it's a very welcoming organization. It is not dogmatic. There are people that come from various religious faiths or believe in no higher being at all.
And I rejected religion at the time that I sort of first self-identified as gay as an early teen. And I think despite the fact that my gay liberation self-process didn't come till I was 18, 19, even at that much younger age, somehow I felt that if God was supposed to be loving and accepting of everybody, etc., and why was I supposed to be like this queer faggot that was something so negative? And it just that just led to my questioning everything about religion and just stopping believing and stopping having any connection with the church at all. So no, I never let them get to me.
Thank you. So here's another one about religion. It seems that conservative religious organizations are becoming increasingly aggressive in their discrimination against queer people, especially in southern and rural parts of the country. Do any of you have any insight or advice on how to combat this uniquely sinister form of oppression carried out in the name of religion?
Hmm. I tell you, it's easy to forget, but the religious oppression of gay people, among others, is going on all over the world in a really bad way. I've recently had a job where I've been talking to gay people in countries like Egypt, Africa, in several countries in Africa that are gay. It's so triggering because they're living a nightmare over there. I mean, they could be in Saudi. I mean, at least technically, you could go to they could execute you in the town square on Saturday for being gay, for just talking about it on the internet, for example. It'd be easy. It wouldn't do to get complacent, um, but you can't stop people from thinking like that. The people that are in this, the people that are pushing this in the South, do you think it's? I don't know that I think it's any worse than it was. Those churches there never give up on all that stuff, especially the Southern Baptist Church. They are avidly anti-gay.
Now, this religious right is very much Christian white supremacist based, and they're highly organized. My advice would be to be on the lookout for them. This group, Moms for Liberty, is very much going around the country trying to get books, LGBTQ books banned from libraries and schools. I forgot what I was going to say. And if anyone is in a religious faith, be it Christian, Judaic, whatever, I think it's important for those religions to speak up against the hatred that the Christian right is espousing, because what is being done in this country is in no way enacting the values of love that most religions say they espouse. I mean, even if you believe there's a problem with too much immigration, you don't round people up like cattle and throw them into El Salvador with no due process. So I think just to be alert to who they are and watch for them in your community. And for us to become better organized, for us to make sure that our friends and family that believe in our rights and believe the way we do are registered to vote and are voting. I mean, that's only one way to do things, but it is one way.
Questions for you, Kathy. Can you speak of any challenges you faced by running as openly gay? And can you speak about your personal journey to exit electoral politics as an office holder in favor of raising a family?
Sure. And I guess somebody read my background to know that. So I was very, very lucky. I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and ran for office in 1974. And it was a radical college campus. I chose to go there because it was so radical. There was sentiment on the campus that you can't be a true feminist unless you're a lesbian, which of course was ridiculous. But that was it was a very, at the time, a very radical and accepting community. Now, not necessarily the other people on city council, but it was a governmental body, and I was treated with respect. So I know that a lot of people have said, oh, you were so brave to run and this and that. And I wasn't. I'm glad I did it. But at the time, I didn't have the risks as if I would have been running in 1974 in Pittsburgh or, Lexington or somewhere. And I got out of electoral politics at the time because I didn't believe it was the most effective way to make social change. Certainly not in Ann Arbor, and not for me, period. I mean, I did continue to do some activism. I was with an organization in New York called Dykes and Tykes at the time. This would have been, about 76, 77. Women were coming out and they were realizing they were gay, and their husbands were trying to take custody of their children on the basis that they could not be a good mother, based solely on the fact that they were identifying as lesbian. So I worked with that group. I worked with the March on Washington, and then yes, I did. I was one of the first people, lesbians in Pittsburgh, to get pregnant as a lesbian and raise a child with a partner. And that was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I have a wonderful son and a wonderful relationship with him. And that did consume a lot of time and energy. And I was by that time ready to be more a supporter of things, such as Black Lives Matter. Obviously, I wouldn't have been an organizer for it, but a supporter of struggles and things that went on, rather than a leader. I did work throughout the years with the Unitarian Church and others on common sense gun laws. That's been something I've been passionate about for years, but it just sort of transitioned for me. I don't know if that answered the question fully.
I think it did. Are there any, this is for anyone, are there any activism tactics that you'll tried or saw but learned didn't work? What mistakes should we not repeat?
I think we're in a time right now that with what's going on, that people have to be very careful about what we're doing. I mean, the ACLU and other groups do have they have training webinars and so forth that sort of tip you off, like when you're going to a protest, what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say, which is basically not to say much in terms of if you were arrested. I think that we want to do things legally. I've never been an advocate of of any kind of violence anyway. Passive resistance, yes, but I think now we have to be really we have to be careful because they are so repressive that we want to have everything, make sure that we do things as legally as possible.
I don't think violence works either. It's clearly it creates secondary issues. I got farther by working with everybody that oppressed me, honestly. I ended up working like giving lectures at the police department, and they picked on me nonstop. They picked on everybody that was gay in NYC nonstop for decades. But by aiming myself straight toward them, I mean, I might have been lucky, but it made a difference. And if I would have just totally stayed in opposition to them, I would have never been able to do that. It's something that it's a bigger thing that I noticed about how big gay people got their acceptance. When people started coming out, you could see it demographically. The more people that said they knew somebody gay personally, the more likely they were to be in favor of equal rights and of treating gay people with parity. And that seems to be the thing that makes the difference. You need to get to know people. So when people know you, it makes it harder for them to pick on you. That's not a very upfront strategy, I realize, but it's something that's important to bear in mind. You win people over. You win people over with positive stuff more than negative usually. Again, I don't know how a person who's a minority can really force things. You can just start killing people or something like that. But that never lasts. The French Revolution, I see people on the internet trafficking that all the time about the situation now. That didn't work. It created an even worse government in France after it was over with than it was there in the first place. And they had a whole series of tyrants for another century. You got to really be responsible, and you got to treat people with respect. That actually works better than anything else for me in my life.
How does one stop the avalanche of hate for November?
I think that's an overwhelming question at the moment, because the avalanche is so huge. And again, that's everybody's been saying, you just have to keep fighting against it with your allies, and not turn on each other, not give in, not give up.
I think that I think that we stop it, or we counter it, we resist it by showing love, by not being defeated, by not caving into to despair, and by not becoming bitter ourselves, and to live our lives as fully as we can with joy, despite everything that's going on, while we resist. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at this and trying to counter what's going on. And I think it helps finding support amongst others who think like you, who you can turn to, when you are feeling down. But I think that fighting the hate by being a loving, positive person who is strong in the world and resisting what's going on, not just oppression to gays, but all of this.
Within UK, the GLF, one of the things that we did start, and we did it anyway, even without being recognized. We ended up staying on campus for years. I'm actually have to explain all that, the way it went there, but we had a group without being recognized up until at least 76. We had a speakers bureau. We were invited to classes. We were invited to social organizations. We went and talked to people about being gay. It was typically a Q&A kind of thing, but it was tremendously effective in making people understand what's going on. I had any number of people tell me, well, I didn't really understand this because I just heard all this stuff from my parents or whatever, but I see your point of view. That to me, that was a really, really constructive thing that I'll never regret being involved in, because I did a lot of it. But there was a whole we always had a panel of people who went around going to classes, answering questions, and kind of being patient. But educating people about stuff never hurts.
No, you're right, it doesn't.
Go ahead.
Okay, I need to be going. I have something happening outside. I didn't know if we were about finishing or not, but I need to go.
Okay, I just wanted to ask one more question.
Sure.
This is for, maybe everyone can answer it. Who gets left behind when pride becomes a brand?
Hmm.
I don't know who gets left behind, but I know you have to wonder what's authentic and what isn't. I was at a Pride March once, and I mean, a company sent people there, and I heard people talking and saying, well, I really didn't want to come, but they volunteered me to come. And I think it's interesting. I think it's very interesting that Target, I'm going to be interested to see what happens this May and June, because Target very much showcased a bunch of Pride T-shirts and swag and this and that. And they were a company that, a couple months ago said they were dropping their diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, based on the wishes of our current president. And
Yeah, you look at the list of all the companies that have rushed to get rid of like DEI policies and caved on that. That's so much for all the support that they gave, lending their brand to gay pride parades in the past. It just shows the hypocrisy of when pride becomes parades and dependent on money from corporations.
I would say to buy local and support small businesses. And I know for me, I intend to be, well, I was going to say in as many Pride marches this year as I can, because I've had it with what's going on, and I'll be in Pittsburgh and I'll be in Detroit and I don't know where else, but
I feel the same way. I don't much care about all this stuff. I don't like crowd anyway, but I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to stand up for it anyway. That's an interesting question. It's hard to answer, I think, but I was watching real close in the 80s because it was a breakthrough. I said, the minute they start showing gay people and they start advertising for gay people, that means we've arrived, we're safe. And we kind of were, because they started having gay beer commercials and big advertisers started advertising in the Advocate and stuff. And it's like, in a capitalist society, that's making it. it isn't perfect and it doesn't mean anything to humanistic values, but it means you're being treated like an equal consumer in a consumer society. Uh, then it gets kind of sour, like you pointed out. It turns into this kind of cynical commercialization. But frankly, everything in the United States ends up that way if it goes on too long. I mean, every single human experience becomes a buying opportunity, and they merchandise it into some kind of retail hell. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Does anyone have anything else they would like to say?
Thank you. Thanks again for letting us
Thank you for
document this.
organizing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you
doing
to
this.
the
And
people out there for joining us.
yeah, for everybody out there, I think this is really, as you are able, and obviously people, people have different things at risk and so forth, but as you are able, to be out and to be active, and I mean, even voting, sending letters, or not letters, but emails to your representatives, making your voices heard. It is important right now. I think this is the most important time, of my life to be active,
I, I,
sadly.
I would like to thank panelists. I'm delighted I got to hear you speak. This is a totally unique opportunity. Never in a million years in a pre-digital age would I've ever even laid eyes on either of you. And it's wonderful. I know all kinds of stuff now I didn't know like an hour and a half ago, I'm going to tell you. It's so cool.
great. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending, and hope everyone has a good day.
Thanks so much, August. Everybody
Bye.
stay
Yeah.
strong.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.